Hello and welcome to the Legislative Report. I'm John Banville. Our guest this week is Senator Joe Robach. Senator Robach, thank you very much for being here today.
Well, great to be here as always, and again, have an opportunity to fill those interested in watching in a little bit on some of the things that are working and going on here in the state capitol.
Senator Robach, we've spent a number of programs discussing your commitment to creating jobs, reducing the costs of government, and basically changing the philosophy state government has been operating under. I'd like to shift gears a little bit. We don't usually talk about public safety, yet you have championed many great causes, and you continue the fight to this day. Can you tell us a little bit about what's been going on in the area of public safety?
Yeah, certainly. While there's been a huge focus, as you point out, and rightfully so, on the state budget, what direction we're going on to, and we make no bones about it, there really has been not only a philosophical, but a directional battle, if you will, especially with some of my colleagues from New York City, who over the last several years have raised taxes and fees extremely high at a slow time in the economy, despite some of the voices of many of us in the upstate Republican and upstate caucus, as well as the Republican minority conference over the last 2 years. And those things continue to be important, not only how it impacts working men and women, working families in upstate New York, but there's a lot of other things that we do here that sometimes, given the time, we don't talk about. But whether it's been protecting young children, Jenna's Law, Megan's Law, whether it's been trying to keep kids safe when they're transported, those things are always very important. And having had the privilege and opportunity to work for Monroe County Department of Public Safety and work in very close conjunction with both the Sheriff's Department, RPD, and a lot of local police departments on highway and traffic safety issues, a number of other things as well, it's always been something important to me because I've got to work with a lot of the unfortunate victims and see how it impacts them. So today, I'm very, very happy that we were able to not only have a press conference here in Albany, but also are moving toward passing legislation called Brittany's Law, which would be a piece of legislation that I think would be very helpful to a lot of people, which would basically create, to sum it up, an additional register for all violent felons, so people get that information, very similar to the sex offender registry, which currently exists, only really expand that to all violent felons, give them a rating, and this would take in people who have had a history of violent acts, people who have used weapons, other things of that nature, people who have been involved in domestic violence and things of that nature. I think that would be a really, really good tool.
You mentioned that there was a news conference earlier this week. I'd like to show our viewers at home what a victim's mother had to say about the importance of enacting Brittany's Law.
Sure.
First of all, I want to say Mike is so right in saying this can happen to any of you. We never thought it could happen to us. No one's immune. This is something that happens in movies. As soon as this happened, I got in touch with Mike, and he got me into his office, and we discussed this. Changes need to be made. Helen was never made aware of anything that was going on. Had she had this tool, she could have found out what this man did. He had actually thrown his 7-week-old baby up against a wall. And had she known this, she never would have allowed a child like this around her children, or a man. Things need to be changed. This can happen to you guys, any one of you. This can happen to President Obama's children. No one is immune to this. And if this can just save one life, then Helen and Brittany will not have died in vain, because it was such a senseless act. It was all over money, especially Brittany. Brittany could have gotten out the door, but she didn't leave because she was helping her mom. She wanted to save her mom's life. And So Brittany died for trying to help her mom.
And you know, that right there is a victim, one of unfortunately many victims, right from our Finger Lakes area. That was the mother of Helen Buchel and the grandmother of Brittany Passalacqua, who were killed by this John Edward Brown, who had just been released from prison, no knowledge of them, for some violent acts. She began dating, I think from meeting him through almost on a blind date, only to find out under a very short time that his violent nature, reappeared. And again, as the mother pointed out very accurately, not only did he very tragically and brutally murder the mother, but then continue to murder the daughter of this woman, Helen Buchel, for trying to stick up for her mother. And, I think as the times have changed and people now are a little bit more spread out, may meet somebody on the internet, somewhere else, date someone from another series, our whole population has become more transient. We don't have as much information about people as we've had in the past, at least knowing them from the community or growing up together, those types of things. So I really, really believe more than being able to Google somebody, find out if they're a violent predicate felon, a repeat felon, or have something very dangerous in their past. These are all post-conviction, not prior to. We, by all means, should give everyone every tool that we can to keep them safe, whether it's adults, whether it's parents, to perhaps look at who their children may be dating, maybe meeting, all of those things. This is all an attempt to preventively have people from not coming into contact, certainly in an intimate or the wrong setting, of anyone who has a history or a propensity to violence. I think it makes all the sense in the world. We also had at that press conference additional legislators and victims. We heard Helen Buchel's mom there in the clip, but we also had people from law enforcement talk about this being a good tool and a good way for the public to be a little bit more educated, and also for people to know a little bit about the character of the people they're dealing with, whether it's dating, workplace, whatever it might be.
But very simply put, what this Brittany's Law does is once you're convicted of a violent felony, you go on a list.
Correct.
And that's it as far as
that's it.
There are no punitive actions. It's just so people can find out if you have a violent history. Correct.
It would just be like you'd be able to access that information, just like the current sex offender registry. And I would say this too, there were some media folks at the press conference who asked the questions almost in a derogatory way of saying, well, if you put this bill into place, won't you in fact be branding these people and making them more challenged to meet people or get a job or things of that nature? And I find that very odd thinking. The scars of the victims and their families never go away. Neither should the record of the people who choose to do this violence. And I think people have every right to know post-conviction. We can certainly go sit in the courtroom, watch the proceedings. Why not have that information out there so it can help someone avoid, again, being in a dangerous situation with a dangerous person to begin with? It's really true. And in the case of some of these victims who have been with people who have done everything from, pistol whipped, shot somebody, abused the child, been violent in previous relationships, there's not even a scar of that victim. Some of them, unfortunately, are dead. Far too many from being involved with the wrong person. And almost in every case, rarely, if at all, do the victims or their families ever know that here's the past record and actions of that individual. And so that really does become alarming to me. And on the point of employment, it is already federal law that they can ask you, have you been convicted of a felony? And you are obligated to answer that correctly, or you can be dismissed or not considered from employment right away. So I don't know, for lack of a better term, for some of the people that seem to be concerned a little bit more than I would be about the rights of the violent felons rather than the innocent potential victims, I think they're really barking up the wrong tree.
Senator Robach, are there other states that have created this type of a registry?
Right, certainly. You know, I always like to think of New York State government being one of the most protective, but interestingly enough, Kansas, Montana, Kentucky, Oklahoma, Indiana, Florida, Nevada, Illinois, all already have some form of the violent offenders registry. So we certainly wouldn't be breaking ground, but we would be in the batch of the first ones if we were to pass this. And I really, really hope, you know, we do that, you know, again, both as a legislator and someone who's worked around and with law enforcement. I'd hate to see more victimization, but I would also say, you know, wearing my other hat as a father, I think that's a great tool for people to be able to use and either put themselves at ease or find out that information in advance very early on in any relationship process, to know a little bit more about those people that you're coming in contact with. It just makes all the sense in the world to me. And again, I'll go back to some of these, I find, ill-founded fears on what would happen to these people who have already violated. I think that's the consequences of your actions from choosing either to take someone's life, treat them in a violent manner, you know, abuse people in a domestic relationship. I, quite frankly, am not as concerned about their difficulty in living with their already committed bad actions. I am very, very concerned about more people getting victimized or perhaps losing their life, or having more mothers like this have to come forward because their daughters, granddaughters, or grandsons, sons have been killed because they've been involved with people they know very little about, what would be considered certainly beyond character, but a very concerning activity that's happened in their life, and very, very poor and dangerous decision they've wreaked on somebody else.
I know that you have been an advocate of protecting our families so that they don't get torn apart by violence. However, the Assembly has always been hesitant to enact these sort of bills. Do you think that this year things may be different?
I don't know if they'll be different, but I would have to say that not only does this bill have bipartisan support in the Senate, we also have Mike Spano, who's a majority member in the Assembly, sponsoring that. And oftentimes, for some of the things we talked about earlier, their Codes Committee seems to always be very thorough in almost making sure, for, I'll say it nicely, that sometimes the people that violated are inconvenienced. I hope they'll really put the focus on the needs of protecting the public. If they do, I'm fairly certain any logical person would pass that bill as well. So we're going to watch and monitor this. I'm hopeful for everyone's benefit that the Assembly will stand up and follow the Senate's lead and pass this, what I believe will be landmark legislation.
Senator Robach, I want to thank you very much for being here, and I'm sure you'll be informing us on how Brittany's law makes it through the legislative process.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll see you soon.